The cameras were rolling. Cody Brown was ready for his big moment, proof that he was still a good father. But Truly Brown wasn't playing along. She stood outside Robyn's mansion and said 5 words that destroyed everything. "I don't feel safe here." What happened next exposed the biggest lie in Brown family history. For years, Cody Brown has publicly praised Robyn's Flagstaff mansion as the ultimate sanctuary, the crown jewel of his unconventional family empire. He called it his safe haven, his refuge from the chaos of managing multiple households, and the only truly functional home in the entire Brown family universe. On camera and in countless interviews, Cody spoke about Robyn's house with a reverence typically reserved for sacred spaces, positioning it as the geographical and emotional center of everything the Brown family represented. He demanded absolute loyalty to this house, insisting that his children from previous marriages respect Robyn's domain as the undeniable headquarters of their fractured family world. The mansion itself, purchased for approximately $890,000 in 2019, sits prominently in Flagstaff, Arizona, boasting over 4,400 square feet of living space. Cody frequently referenced the home size and amenities as evidence of his success as a provider and patriarch. He spoke glowingly about the home's open floor plan, the mountain views, and the supposed warmth that permeated every room. In Cody's carefully constructed narrative, this wasn't just a house. It was a symbol of what a Brown family home should be, a standard against which all other residences were measured and inevitably found wanting. He contrasted it sharply with the homes of his other wives, particularly Janelle and Christine, often making pointed comments about their housekeeping, organization, and ability to create what he considered a proper family environment. But behind the perfectly manicured facade that viewers saw in carefully edited TLC segments and beyond the glowing testimonials Cody provided in confessional interviews, a very different and deeply troubling reality was allegedly festering just out of camera range. What was supposed to be a castle, a palace of family harmony and successful plural marriage, had, according to numerous reports and insider accounts, morphed into something unrecognizable, chaotic, and psychologically suffocating for those who entered its walls. The contrast between what Cody claimed about the home and what was actually happening inside grew starker with each passing season. Eagle-eyed fans of Sister Wives had been noticing troubling details for years, long before any official acknowledgement of problem. During the few scenes filmed inside Robyn's Flagstaff home, viewers began screenshotting and analyzing backgrounds with forensic precision. What they discovered was disturbing. Stacks of unopened cardboard boxes appeared in hallways and corners. Piles of what appeared to be merchandise and shopping bags cluttered visible surfaces. Collections of Precious Moments figurines seemed to multiply with each episode, crowding shelves and tables until there was barely any breathing room. Online forums dedicated to the show began buzzing with speculation about hoarding behaviors and compulsive shopping habits that were being hidden from the main storyline. The whispers grew louder when family members began making cryptic comments in interviews. Christine, during her separation process, made veiled references to different standards being applied to different households. Janelle spoke about feeling unwelcome in certain spaces. The older children, including Gwendolyn and Paydown, made pointed remarks on social media about the disparity between how their childhood homes were treated versus the reverence demanded for Robyn's residence. But no one wanted to directly confront what many suspected, that the so-called perfect home was anything but perfect behind closed doors. It took the youngest, most observant daughter, Truly Brown, to finally rip the mask off completely and expose the reality that had been hidden behind those closed doors for so long. Truly, who was born in 2010 and spent her early childhood navigating the complexities of plural marriage before her mother Christine left Cody in 2021, had a unique perspective. She remembered what a functional, loving home felt like with Christine. She had experienced the genuine warmth of a space where people mattered more than possession. And when confronted with Robyn's mansion and the expectations placed upon her to validate it, she couldn't bring herself to participate in the charade her father was orchestrating. The tension had been building for months, perhaps years, as Cody's public image crumbled following the very public divorces from Christine and Janelle and the spiritual divorce from Mary. His desperate need to prove that his remaining monogamous relationship with Robyn was healthy, functional, and superior to his failed plural marriage became increasingly obvious to viewers. He needed validation, and he needed it captured on camera for the world to see. He needed his children, particularly the younger ones who still had some obligation to maintain a relationship with him, to endorse Robyn's home as the family sanctuary he claimed it was. But Truly had inherited her mother Christine's strength and clarity of vision. She had watched her mother walk away from a suffocating situation where her needs were constantly minimized. She had seen the peace that came from setting boundaries and refusing to accept unacceptable conditions. And when the moment came for her to either validate her father's narrative or stand in her own truth, Truly chose truth. What happened during that fateful visit would send shockwaves through the family, expose the carefully hidden reality of Robyn's mansion, and establish a boundary that would fundamentally reshape the Brown family dynamics forever. The perfect facade that Cody had maintained for years was about to crumble completely, and this time it would happen in front of the cameras he had counted on to save his reputation. To understand how everything fell apart so spectacularly, we need to examine the context of Cody's crumbling public image and his increasingly desperate attempts to salvage what remained of his reputation as a successful polygamist patriarch. By 2023, the man who had once proudly presented himself as the head of a thriving plural family had watched his entire empire collapse in spectacular fashion. Christine had officially left him in November 2021, taking Truly with her to Utah and publicly declaring that she deserved better treatment than what Cody had provided during their 25-year marriage. Janelle followed shortly after, effectively ending her relationship with Cody despite no formal divorce being filed. Even Mary, who had desperately tried to repair their relationship for years following her 2015 catfishing scandal, finally acknowledged that Cody had no intention of ever being a true husband to her again. Public opinion had turned drastically against Cody as viewers watched season after season of him showing blatant favoritism toward Robyn while neglecting his other wives and their children. Social media was flooded with criticism of his parenting choices, his treatment of his adult children during the COVID-19 pandemic, and his apparent inability to maintain relationships with anyone except Robyn and her children. The man who had built his identity around being a successful polygamist was now effectively monogamous, and the irony wasn't lost on the viewing audience. Cody was panicking behind the scenes, desperate for validation and a way to prove to the world that he wasn't the villain TLC editing and public perception had made him out to be. Insider reports suggest that Cody became obsessed with finding a storyline that would redeem him in the public eye and prove to viewers that he was still a loving, engaged father despite the family fragmentation. His grand plan centered around bringing his youngest daughter, Truly, who was living full-time with Christine in Utah, to stay at Robyn's Flagstaff house for what was meant to be a highly publicized weekend visit captured extensively by the TLC production crew. This wasn't conceived as a casual family gathering or a spontaneous father-daughter bonding opportunity. According to those close to the production, this was a meticulously calculated PR maneuver designed from the ground up to show viewers that his newly monogamous life with Robyn was not only functional, but actually thriving and healthy. Cody wanted the camera strategically positioned to capture what he envisioned as a picture-perfect blended family scene, laughter echoing through Robyn's spacious living room, Truly bonding warmly with Robyn's children Ariella and Solomon, home-cooked family meals around the dinner table, and heartwarming conversations that would demonstrate the deep connection he maintained with his daughter despite the geographical distance and family breakdown. He needed this specific narrative to work, to gain traction with viewers, and to save his thoroughly tarnished reputation as both a father and family leader. And he was willing to use his own 13-year-old daughter as the primary instrument to achieve that crucial public relations victory. But this visit was never truly about making Truly feel welcomed, loved, or comfortable in her father's home. It was never about creating genuine connection or repairing the damage that had been done to their relationship through years of neglect and favoritism toward Robyn's children. According to theories circulating among those close to the production and family insiders, Cody was actually setting an elaborate psychological trap for his youngest daughter, placing her in an impossible double-bind situation from which there was no winning escape. The manipulation was built into the very structure of the visit itself, creating a scenario where Truly would lose regardless of how she responded to the environment. If Truly smiled for the cameras, played along with the script Cody had envisioned and pretended that everything was perfectly fine and normal, Cody would get his ultimate victory and the validation he so desperately craved. He could point to the footage during confessional interviews and in social media responses, declaring triumphantly that Robyn's home truly was the safe harbor, the family sanctuary, and the functional household he had always claimed it to be. He could use his daughter's apparent happiness as evidence that Christine was wrong to leave, that the other ex-wives were bitter and jealous, and that his parenting and household with Robyn were actually superior to anything his previous wives had provided. The footage would become ammunition in his ongoing battle to control the family narrative. However, Cody had also prepared for the alternative scenario with equal calculation and forethought. If Truly showed even a hint of discomfort during the visit, if she expressed any reservations about the house or asked to return home early, if she appeared anything less than delighted to be there, Cody allegedly had a comprehensive backup plan ready to deploy immediately. Insiders suggest that Cody was fully prepared to brand his own daughter as an ungrateful, spoiled child who had been systematically manipulated and brainwashed by Christine to hate Robyn and reject the Brown family values he claimed to uphold. It was a vicious, no-win situation for a young girl who was simply trying to navigate the aftermath of her parents' divorce and maintain some kind of relationship with her father. Either she validated Cody and Robyn's lifestyle and living situation by performing happiness for the cameras, essentially betraying her own feelings and her mother Christine in the process, or she became the convenient scapegoat for all of Cody's failed parenting decisions, relationship breakdown, and poor choices over the previous several years. The psychological pressure placed on Truly's shoulders was immense and completely inappropriate for a child of her age. Cody was completely blind to the immense emotional burden he was placing on his daughter, unable or unwilling to see beyond his own desperate need for public validation. He was so focused on how the narrative would play out on television, how it would be received by viewers, and how it might repair his damaged reputation that he couldn't see the actual human child standing in front of him. He couldn't recognize that Truly was a person with her own feelings, perceptions, and needs, rather than simply a prop in his carefully staged redemption storyline. His narcissism and desperation had completely overridden any genuine parental instinct or concern for his daughter's well-being. But what Cody didn't anticipate, what he completely failed to calculate in his elaborate planning, was that Truly had inherited her mother's backbone, intuition, and unwillingness to accept unacceptable situations. He underestimated his daughter's ability to recognize manipulation, to trust her own instincts, and to stand firm in her own truth regardless of the pressure being applied. For years, eagle-eyed viewers and dedicated fans of Sister Wives had been engaged in intense speculation about the actual conditions inside Robyn's Flagstaff mansion, carefully analyzing every frame of footage that made it past TLC's editing room. What started as casual observations in online forums gradually evolved into serious concerns about what was really happening behind the carefully controlled facade that the network and the family worked so hard to maintain. The speculation wasn't baseless conspiracy theorizing, it was grounded in concrete visual evidence that appeared repeatedly in background shots, despite the production team's apparent efforts to minimize what viewers could see of the home's interior. The evidence from background shots became increasingly difficult to ignore as seasons progressed and the family dynamics shifted. Sharp-eyed fans began creating detailed screenshot compilations showing mysterious cardboard boxes stacked in corners and hallways, visible even when the camera was focused on interview subjects in the foreground. There were overwhelming amounts of clutter visible on countertops, tables, and every available surface, creating a sense of chaos that contradicted Cody's constant praise of Robyn's domestic ability. Most notably, there appeared to be a vast army of Precious Moments figurines, those collectible porcelain pieces that retail between $25 and $150 each, covering shelves, mantels, and display cases throughout the visible portions of the home. Social media users with expertise in interior organization and even some with backgrounds in addressing hoarding behaviors began weighing in on what they observed. They noted that the sheer volume of items visible in brief shots suggested a much larger accumulation problem throughout areas of the home that cameras never accessed. The boxes, many clearly marked with QVC logos and other home shopping network branding, appeared to be unopened in numerous instances, suggesting compulsive purchasing without actual use of the items being acquired. What should have been a showcase of Robyn's homemaking skills instead appeared to many trained observers as a textbook example of shopping addiction manifesting in physical clutter. The alleged transformation of the property from what should have been a luxury mansion into what many characterized as a claustrophobic maze represented a dramatic fall from the image Cody worked so hard to project. The home, with its 4,400 square feet and open concept design, should have felt spacious and welcoming. Instead, reports suggested that the accumulation of QVC packages, unused merchandise still in shipping materials, decorative items that had never been properly displayed, and endless purchases had effectively shrunk the usable living space. Areas that were architecturally designed to be gathering spaces for the large blended family had allegedly become obstacle courses of possessions, making natural movement through the home difficult and psychologically oppressive. The hoarding rumors gained credibility when former family friends and distant relatives began making cryptic comments on social media, carefully worded to avoid potential legal issues, but clearly suggesting they had witnessed concerning conditions firsthand. Some referenced feeling overwhelmed during visits, while others mentioned that certain rooms had become inaccessible due to storage issues. Peyton Brown, Christine's son, made several pointed remarks during podcast interviews about the different standards applied to different households, noting that his mother's homes were criticized for minor imperfections, while serious issues elsewhere went unaddressed and even defended. What was at stake if these conditions were fully exposed on camera went far beyond simple embarrassment. Robyn's carefully cultivated perfect wife image, which she had maintained since joining the family in 2010, would be irreparably shattered if viewers saw definitive proof that her home was not the sanctuary Cody described, but rather a monument to unchecked consumerism and poor household management. After years of being positioned as the wife who did everything right, who kept the best home, who managed her children most effectively, and who deserved Cody's primary attention and resources, the revelation that her living environment was potentially unhealthy would completely undermine the narrative that had sustained her favored position. TLC's carefully crafted narrative about the Brown family would also suffer irreparable damage. The network had invested over 18 seasons in presenting a particular story about plural marriage, family dynamics, and the challenges of managing multiple households. If the flagship household, the one that received the most resources and attention, was revealed to be struggling with hoarding behaviors and shopping addiction, it would raise serious questions about the network's responsibility in documenting and potentially enabling problematic behaviors rather than addressing them. The family's overall reputation, already damaged by the public divorces and Cody's increasingly erratic behavior on camera, would face another devastating blow that might finally end viewer sympathy entirely. Cody's miscalculation in planning this visit stemmed from his fundamental assumption of control over the situation and everyone involved. He genuinely believed that his parental authority, combined with the pressure of cameras and the awkwardness of causing a scene, would force Truly into compliance with his script for the weekend. He had apparently convinced himself that a 13-year-old girl wouldn't have the awareness, vocabulary, or courage to articulate what was wrong with the environment, and that even if she felt uncomfortable, she would suppress those feelings rather than create conflict. This assumption revealed how little Cody actually understood his daughter or respected her capacity for independent thought and genuine perception. He severely underestimated Truly's intuition, her emotional intelligence, and her absolute refusal to pretend everything was normal when her instincts were screaming the opposite. Truly had spent years watching her mother Christine gradually recognize and name the dysfunction in her marriage, slowly building the courage to leave an unacceptable situation despite enormous pressure to stay. She had witnessed firsthand what happened when someone finally stopped performing happiness and started honoring their genuine feeling. Truly had learned from her mother's example that it was not only acceptable but necessary to trust your own perceptions even when authority figures insisted you were wrong. As the day of the visit finally arrived, the tension in the Flagstaff air was palpable to everyone involved in the production. The cameras were positioned in their carefully planned locations, lighting was set to capture the warm, family-friendly atmosphere Cody had envisioned, and the production schedule was built around documenting this redemption narrative. Cody was mentally prepared to play the role of the benevolent, loving patriarch welcoming his daughter into his home, ready to demonstrate for the cameras what he insisted was his natural parenting ability. Robyn was waiting to welcome her stepdaughter into her so-called safe haven, prepared to show viewers that she had always been unfairly maligned by the other wives and that her home was genuinely superior. But what actually happened the moment Truly arrived at the property would shock everyone involved in the production, devastate Cody's carefully constructed plans, tear the remaining family dynamic apart at the seams, and bring the long hidden truth about that house directly into the blinding spotlight where it could no longer be denied, minimized, or explained away. The moment the car door clicked shut in Robyn's driveway on that fateful day, the atmosphere allegedly shifted from merely uncomfortable to downright toxic and psychologically charged. According to reports from those close to the production and individuals with knowledge of what transpired, Truly didn't just hesitate or show mild reluctance when she emerged from the vehicle. She completely froze in place, her entire body going rigid with an instinctive resistance that no amount of coaching or preparation could have manufactured. As the cameras rolled, positioned to capture what Cody and the production team had envisioned as a heartwarming reunion between father and daughter, the young girl reportedly refused to even cross the threshold of the massive Flagstaff home, remaining firmly planted outside despite encouragement, cajoling, and eventually pressure from those around her. Insiders claim that Truly was visibly distressed from the moment she laid eyes on the house's interior through the open front door. Her body language was unmistakable to anyone paying attention, shoulders hunched protectively, arms wrapped around herself defensively, eyes wide with what witnesses described as genuine fear rather than mere reluctance or typical teenage resistance. This wasn't a child being manipulated by scripts or coached responses. This was a visceral, involuntary physical reaction to an environment that triggered every alarm bell her young nervous system possessed. The production crew, who had filmed hundreds of family interactions over the years, reportedly recognized immediately that something was genuinely wrong, that this wasn't playing out according to anyone's script or expectations. It's been whispered through various sources that Truly eventually broke down in tears, her emotional defenses completely overwhelmed by the situation in which she found herself trapped. She reportedly told production staff members, her father, and anyone within earshot that she felt physically and emotionally unsafe inside the house, using those specific and damning words that no amount of editing could reframe as typical childhood dramatics or parental alienation. The language was too clear, too specific, and too genuine to be dismissed. When a 13-year-old uses the word unsafe to describe her father's home, it represents a catastrophic failure of the environment and the parent responsible for creating it. This wasn't just a child being difficult, bratty, or demonstrating the influence of another parent's alleged manipulation, as Cody would later try to claim. This was a visceral, authentic reaction to an environment that had become completely overwhelming to someone encountering it with fresh eyes and without the gradual normalization that allows problematic situations to seem acceptable. When people talk about feeling unsafe, the typical assumption is that they're referring to a threat from a person, an aggressive individual, an abuser, someone whose behavior creates danger. But in this house, reports emphatically suggest the threat wasn't coming from any individual person's actions. The threat was the house itself, the physical environment, and the psychological atmosphere it created. The suffocating, chaotic energy of the interior was allegedly so intense, so palpable, and so oppressive that a child's natural survival instinct was to flee rather than enter, to escape rather than comply. For years, dedicated fans and concerned viewers have scrutinized every blurry background shot that made it through TLC's editing process. Every brief glimpse into the hallway during transitional footage, every reflected image in mirrors or windows that revealed more than intended. What they saw in those accumulated fragments was deeply concerning and painted a picture that contradicted everything Cody claimed about the home's quality and atmosphere. The reality behind those carefully guarded doors was dramatically different from the perfect family image that Robyn and Cody tried desperately to project for the cameras and public consumption. The house wasn't just messy in the way that active family homes naturally become with daily life. According to multiple reports and the visual evidence fans had compiled, it was allegedly a literal maze of consumerism gone catastrophically wrong, a physical manifestation of spending and acquisition without purpose or organization. Rumors and insider reports suggest that every available square inch of floor space was occupied by towering stacks of QVC shipping boxes, some still sealed and never opened open despite being purchased months or even years earlier. There were expensive Precious Moments figurines still in their original packaging, never removed or displayed, representing hundreds or potentially thousands of dollars in collectibles that served no purpose beyond the momentary satisfaction of acquisition. Mountains of clutter had allegedly never been unpacked, sorted, or put away, instead accumulating in layers that documented years of unchecked shopping habits. Imagine the psychological impact of walking into a space that is supposed to be a home, a place of rest, safety, and comfort, only to find it looks more like a neglected warehouse, a storage unit that someone is living in rather than a living space that contains some stored item. Reports claim that the hoarding, if it can be called that without a clinical diagnosis, had reached a point where it felt like the walls were physically closing in on anyone who entered. The sheer volume of stuff, the density of objects occupying every surface and corner, allegedly created a sense of psychological weight and pressure that was impossible to ignore or rationalize away, especially for someone encountering it for the first time. To a child like Truly, who had been raised in much more open, organized, and stable environments with her mother Christine, entering that house was like walking into a physical trap designed to trigger anxiety and claustrophobia. Christine's homes, while criticized by Cody for being less luxurious or spacious, were consistently described by her children as comfortable, welcoming, and genuinely livable. Truly knew what a functional home felt like. She understood instinctively that living spaces should allow you to breathe, move freely, and exist without constant navigation around obstacles. The contrast between her normal living environment and what she encountered at Robyn's mansion was so stark, so jarring, that her body reacted before her conscious mind could even fully process what she was experiencing. This wasn't about expensive versus modest, large versus small, or decorated versus plain. This was about livable versus unlivable, safe versus unsafe, healthy versus unhealthy. But what's even more shocking than the conditions themselves was how Cody reportedly reacted to his daughter's genuine fear and distress. Instead of seeing a child in crisis who needed comfort, protection, and immediate removal from a situation causing her harm, Cody allegedly saw only a threat to his carefully constructed ego and his desperate plan for public redemption. Instead of recognizing that Truly's reaction represented valuable information about serious problems in his household, he interpreted her fear as a personal attack, a rejection of his authority, and evidence of Christine's supposed manipulation. His inability to prioritize his daughter's emotional state over his own need for validation revealed the depth of his dysfunction as a parent. Cody's delusion was so deep, so thoroughly entrenched in his psyche, that he couldn't distinguish between a stable, nurturing home and a house filled with expensive objects that created chaos rather than comfort. The cognitive dissonance required to simultaneously insist that Robyn's home was perfect, while his daughter stood there in tears, saying she felt unsafe, was extraordinary. But Cody had spent years building an identity around being right, being the wise patriarch whose judgment was superior to everyone else's, and he wasn't about to let reality interfere with that self-image, even when reality was crying right in front of him. Cody's reaction to his daughter's genuine fear revealed the true depth of his delusion and his complete inability to prioritize people over his own ego. Instead of immediately recognizing that a distressed child required parental comfort, concern, and action, Cody reportedly saw Truly's breakdown as nothing more than a threat to his carefully orchestrated public relations campaign. According to insiders close to the situation, his first instinct wasn't to ask what was wrong or to address his daughter's concerns with empathy and understanding. His first instinct was rage, not at the conditions that had caused her distress, but at Truly herself for failing to play the role he had assigned her in his redemption narrative. It's been said that Cody's delusion ran so extraordinarily deep that he had completely lost the ability to distinguish between a stable, nurturing home environment and a house simply filled with expensive objects and material possessions. In his fundamentally warped perception of reality, the equation was straightforward and unquestionable, providing a massive mansion with a purchase price of $890,000, filling it with countless Precious Moments figurines that retail for substantial amounts, and ensuring that Robyn had access to. Unlimited shopping budgets meant he was automatically a successful father and provider, regardless of the actual livability or psychological atmosphere of the space. Cody had spent years, particularly during the later seasons of Sister Wives, aggressively criticizing Janelle and Christine's housekeeping skills and domestic management ability. He made snide, belittling remarks about their smaller, more modest homes during family meetings and confessional interviews. He questioned their parenting styles, suggesting that their households lacked the structure and quality that his children deserved. He positioned himself as the standard of excellence, the one who truly understood what children needed, while his other wives fell short of his exacting standard. Yet here he was, according to exclusive theories and insider reports, presiding over what numerous observers characterized as a legitimate hoarding nightmare, while simultaneously demanding that his children worship the ground Robyn walked on and treat her home as sacred, untouchable, and superior to anything their mothers provided. The hypocrisy was staggering in its scope and completely lost on Cody himself. He equated the mere purchase of material possessions with the creation of a loving, safe environment, completely ignoring and dismissing the significant psychological toll that living in such a chaotic, cluttered, disorganized space takes on a person, particularly on a developing child or adolescent. Child psychologists and environmental psychologists have extensively documented how cluttered, chaotic environments increase stress hormones, decrease ability to focus, create anxiety, and undermine feelings of safety and control. But Cody didn't see the towers of boxes, the unopened packages, or the overwhelming accumulation of items as a problem requiring attention and intervention. Instead, in his thoroughly distorted perception, he saw them as tangible proof of his wealth, success, and Robyn's refined taste and sophisticated shopping habits. Every QVC package represented not a symptom of compulsive behavior, but evidence that he could provide luxury items for his favorite wife. Every figurine wasn't clutter, but a testament to Robyn's appreciation for beautiful things. The fact that these items created an environment so oppressive that his own daughter refused to enter apparently never penetrated his defensive rationalization. When Truly pointed out the obvious reality of the situation through her emotional and physical response, Cody didn't offer comfort, flexibility, or willingness to acknowledge and address the problem. According to reports, he offered rage, blame, and aggressive defensiveness instead. The situation allegedly hit a dramatic boiling point when Cody fully realized that his meticulously planned strategy for a public relations victory was falling apart catastrophically right in front of the TLC cameras that were supposed to document his redemption. Reports suggest he completely lost his temper in a way that production crews found shocking even given his history of emotional outbursts. He was screaming at the production crew members, at the empty air around him, and at anyone who would listen that Christine had systematically poisoned Truly's mind against him and Robyn. He reportedly claimed, with apparent complete conviction, that his daughter had been deliberately coached and manipulated to hate Robyn's beautiful things and to reject the wonderful home he had provided. In Cody's increasingly frantic narrative, Truly's fear wasn't a genuine response to real environmental conditions. It was nothing more than a calculated performance, a scripted act orchestrated by his ex-wife Christine as part of what he characterized as a vendetta against him and his relationship with Robyn. This was the moment when the mask Cody had worn for cameras truly slipped completely, revealing the narcissistic core beneath the patriarch performance. The idea that a 13-year-old girl might have her own legitimate perceptions, feelings, and responses independent of parental manipulation apparently couldn't penetrate his defensive framework. In his mind, children were extensions of their parents rather than independent human beings, so Truly's distress must be Christine's fault rather than a genuine reaction to genuine problems. The internet response was swift, harsh, and absolutely disgusted as details of this confrontation began to leak through various channels and insider sources. Fans who had watched the family for over 13 years felt they were finally seeing the truth behind the carefully maintained facade. Social media platforms exploded with commentary as users immediately started pulling old screenshots from previous episodes, creating side-by-side compilations that circled visible piles of packages and clutter in the background of supposedly staged family scenes. Some users with backgrounds in fire safety and building codes began pointing out that the house appeared to be a literal fire hazard, with blocked exits, overcrowded pathways, and combustible materials stacked near what appeared to be heating sources. They saw exactly what Cody stubbornly refused to acknowledge, that no amount of expensive precious Precious Moments figurines, no quantity of QVC merchandise, and no size of mansion can replace or substitute for a genuine sense of peace, security, and emotional safety in a home environment. Material wealth and physical possessions are fundamentally incapable of creating the psychological safety that children require to thrive and feel comfortable. Cody was so completely preoccupied with defending his favorite wife's ego, protecting Robyn's image as the perfect domestic goddess, and justifying her shopping habits against any criticism that he was perfectly willing to force his own 13-year-old daughter into a high-stress, anxiety-inducing environment that made her physically ill just to maintain a transparent lie for the cameras and the viewing public. The irony of the situation is almost too overwhelming to fully comprehend. Cody had spent over a decade, from 2010 when the show first premiered through 2023, preaching loudly and repeatedly about the paramount importance of family culture and the absolute necessity of having a central home where everyone could gather and feel safe and loved. He had positioned himself as the guardian of Brown family values, the keeper of traditions, and the architect of a family structure that would outlast conventional marriages. But through his own choices, his blind devotion to Robyn's lifestyle, his enabling of her spending habits, and his complete inability to see her flaws or hold her accountable, he had created the one place in the entire world where his children felt the least welcome and most uncomfortable. The Flagstaff mansion had allegedly become a cluttered prison rather than a family sanctuary, a place where the air was heavy with unspoken rules, implicit judgment, and the overwhelming physical evidence of a shopping addiction that no one in the family was permitted to discuss, criticize, or even gently question. The more desperately Cody tried to force the narrative of the perfect home and the ideal family life, the more visible the cracks became to viewers, family members, and eventually even to the production crew. Truly wasn't just reacting to visible mess and physical disorganization. She was reacting to the profound hypocrisy of a father who clearly, unmistakably valued material things over the emotional well-being and psychological safety of his own people and children.